Hi, everybody. Welcome to Marc Summers Unwraps. I, first of all, want to thank you for your loyalty because, as many of you know by now, I've been doing my one-man show in New York City since January and have not had an opportunity to record many new shows. And the theory is generally in our office, unless it's Jesus or Obama, you got to be in the studio. I just don't like doing Zooms. There's just a different feel about them. And we've got some great guests coming up. Phil Rosenthal is going to be joining us when I get back to California. Carrot Top, a friend of mine from probably 35 years ago in my stand-up days, is going to be joining us. But I'm super excited today because the lady I'm about to introduce, I'm probably president of the fan club, and we've done a lot of television together throughout the years, and you know her from The View, but many other things, The Chase. Sara Haines is with us. How are you?
Oh, it's so nice to be here with that introduction. You're the president. I always wondered who the president of that club was. I thought it was my mom.
No. Yeah, no, we have so many similarities. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. My parents were conservative Jews, if there was such a thing. And I remember when Kent State happened, that's how old I am, and my parents, I'm not going to say were celebrating it, but when the people were shot, their response was not what I would have thought it would have been, but it was such a turbulent time. And so I was confused in my point of view as far as the world and politics. I was pretty right-wing, and I will admit to this. I voted for Richard Nixon the first time I ever had a chance to vote, until I was walking down the street where I was going to school in Boston, and I saw an officer pick up a young girl and throw her on top of a car and started beating her with a baton. And I instantaneously became the most left-wing Democrat in the history of the world because I thought, how can this possibly happen? You grew up in Iowa. Mm-hmm. But you consider yourself to be you're a left-leaning moderate is what you say?
Left-leaning independent.
Oh,
I
independent.
would say, yeah. I'm registered independent, but I often interchange those words, and they're not necessarily interchangeable because the things I feel or have thoughts on, they're not moderate feelings. They're pretty big. But I would say if I were tracing what you just answered, my parents were very conservative. I mean, my mom actually participated in local elections, and my brother below me and my sister above me were in Young Republicans, and my brother's gay. He was a log cabin Republican. Like he's,
Wow.
Yeah. So we had a lot of conservative thoughts. The area was pretty the going norm. I went to Smith College, and
that's East Coast. That's
East Coast, and it's super liberal.
Yeah.
And I remember coming back. It was the first time I think I'd really questioned my beliefs because my parents are such good people, and I respect, and it's probably why I still have a reverence to those who feel differently from me, because I can actually love people so thoroughly and respect them and disagree with them. So that example in my household was profound for me. But when I went to Smith, it was a slow draw. It wasn't one incident like yours. I remember slowly breaking apart from things I thought. Like, I don't even think I was so politically minded. I was busy learning young.
But when you go to college and you see other points of view, your mind starts to open up.
Yes, and it went extreme. Like, it went the totally different way. And I started to come home, and I remember my mom laughing once at the dinner table. There's 4 of us kids, and I'm sitting there, and something happened, and my mom's like, well, what did you think when you sent her to Smith College? And I thought, so you guys knew the whole time. Wow. But so I came back, and it's funny because I do take a lot of the virtues and values from my parents. My beliefs are not actually that far from them anymore because I think they've evolved a lot. So when we get talking, I often push back on my mom on things. She's a dangerous one to talk to, though. She's a little bit of one of those jersey wearers. So my dad and I had a phenomenal conversation last time he visited, but my mom goes ugly when she fights. Like, she'll all of a sudden, I swear she makes it up sometimes. And I'm like, that's just not true. Maybe we should stop now. But
and how does she take it when you call her out on that, though?
I don't usually in the name of peace, because my mom can be, the older she gets, the more stern she gets. My dad's a good faith actor. I think he believes what he thinks. There's reasons why he believes it. But when I've pushed back on him, not even necessarily wanting to change his mind, just out of curiosity, I'll nudge on some of his things. He's open to having that conversation. And I love that about him.
Was he that way when you were younger?
I I don't think I talked much about politics. That's the thing, is I don't remember political conversations. In the Midwest, we didn't talk about what you made. We didn't talk about religion. We didn't talk about divisive topics. And my husband, by the way, is a Russian Jew.
Really?
And his family throws down. Like upon entrance, we say, look at the weather. Aren't these flowers beautiful? Things are happening. That's my family. Max comes in and they're like, what is justice? Go. And everyone's just like the opposite. So we sometimes talk about how those are the types of things I've reconsidered. In the beginning, when I met my husband, I said, we're here to talk about what we find in common, being a family. We haven't seen each other. Let's talk about those things and veer away from the heavy stuff. Max will push back on me. He's like, but if not with those people, who do you want to discuss the heavy stuff with? And I'm like, that's a great point.
100%.
So oftentimes it's that being open to someone pushing back on what you think that's made my mind and my heart grow.
When your parents found out you were marrying a Russian Jew, did they go, that's fantastic, or are you sure? Or
no, they loved it. So we have thrown them for so many loops. So the biggest faux pas in my family was when my oldest sister got a divorce. That divorce in the beginning was the worst sin of our family. Not awful, but they were like, we don't believe in divorce, all these things. Then they have a son who's gay. My first longtime boyfriend in New York was a black homicide detective who was 18 years older than me. And then my sister my other sister had to be proposed to. She had to translate in Portuguese because she married a Catholic from Brazil while she was away on getting her MBA. And then my brother was dating an Indian Hindu. So we'd sit at the table and we'd ask my dad, he did not think this was funny, can you just pronounce the names of everyone at this table? And he would get so upset because
That's
then for
hysterical.
a period that divorced sister was dating a man who's Turkish Muslim named Brock. And so he would always mess up all the names. And so when they heard about Max and I'm finally getting married at 37, they were like, welcome to the family.
Whatever it is, I'm
Whatever
happy
it
to,
is, we love you.
Here's what I love. The View is the number one daytime show. Has been for a very, very long time. First time I was on was 1999.
Wow.
I had written a book about obsessive compulsive disorder, and I got interviewed by Star Jones and Barbara Walters. And to have Barbara across the table from you was intimidating.
Yeah.
When I grew up in the television world, my idol was Bob Barker.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my God, if I ever get a chance to meet Bob Barker, I'm going to go out of my mind. Well, I moved to Los Angeles in 1973, and I get a job as a page at CBS Television City. And the first job I'm assigned to is Price is Right.
No!
And I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'm shaking. I'm trembling. And as I'm walking backstage after the show, I run into Bob. And the first thing I say to him is, I used to come home from nursery school and watch you on Truth or Consequences. Well, that smile went to a frown. That was not anything you ever say to Mr. Barker at the time.
No.
And as it ended up, my first real job in television was writing Truth or Consequences the last year he hosted it. And we became very good friends. And we didn't have a lunchroom at KTTV where we shot it. We had a lunch truck. And the Nixon, let's get rid of him out of the country debate was going on.
Yeah.
And Bob was super right-wing.
Okay.
And I wasn't. And it was fascinating to walk to the lunch truck every day and have discussions. And Bob would say things like, this country doesn't know what they're doing. Richard Nixon is the best president this country's ever seen. And I was in no position to have a discussion and argue with him at that point.
Yeah.
But as I grew in our relationship and we got to know each other, things opened up. Here's the thing that bothered me. As I, don't meet your heroes. The more I got to know him, the less fun it was.
Yeah.
Because I found out who the real guy was, and he wasn't the guy who I thought he was. The worst thing that happened to me, he was being honored at the TV Academy as, the king of all game show hosts, and I got invited. And as I walked in, the LA Times was there, and they wanted to take a picture, and Bob had just walked in, and they said, Mr. Barker, can you take a picture with Mark? We'll do it like the young and the old. Oh, my God. So here it was again, what I started, this reporter said, and Bob said, no, I'm not interested, and walked away. And I said, come on, Bob, do me a favor. And he did take the picture and then left. And he was always worried about younger guys wanting to creep up and take his job. He was never that secure. Mm-hmm. I never found that to be the case with Barbara. I got to know her pretty good over the last 24 years that I did the show. And a magical lady. It took a long time for her to warm up to me, though, I will tell you. What were your thoughts when you got that opportunity to sit across from her and be every day on that panel?
Well, so interestingly, I've met her legacy and I've only met her once. So by the time I joined, she was not on the table. Oh. I watched her like most. I remember I had a moment when I first started the company. There was a retirement party and I walked around the corner and I just looked right at her and I introduced myself, and then I've probably fumbled through words. I have a slew of embarrassing run-ins when I get nervous. But she was like, "Oh, hello." And that was I was not even at the View yet. This was just, but the thing about Barbara that's fascinating, and all that I've learned from so many of the people at the show that worked very closely with her and her book, is that she actually was, like Bob Barker, very insecure. Calling her book Audition, I think, if I have that right.
Yeah.
And it was all about how every day was an audition. And in some ways, it was that hunger. So many people, Mark, if we're being honest, in this business, are driven by a great insecurity.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think I'm more surprised finding some people that covered it better, and the greats often covered it very well, but they were very insecure and never felt safe. But I think that's
interesting.
Well, because I think when you're, and I'm not saying this about Barbara or Bob necessarily, but I think in life, when you are defending a mirage or you're trying to present a mirage, it will be harder to maintain it than by living who you are. So I think that will be a forever race.
It's tough to be in the public eye as much as these folks were anyway. We talk on this show, the whole idea of this podcast, I kept being bombarded, do it. And I kept saying no. And then I said, I have to have a point of view. And my point of view was this. You go to a Broadway show, you see a movie or a TV show, and those people on the screen are in front of you, and you go, wow, they're the luckiest people you've ever seen in your entire life. But my point of view is, no, you have no idea the pain and suffering they went to get from point A to point B.
Yep.
They didn't wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to be starring in The Producers on Broadway today. It took a long time to get to that point. So I came out of the womb knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And luckily, after I was 34 before I got my wish, but I was willing to put in the time. And at 72, I'm doing a show off Broadway, which I never thought was going to happen. Did you know exactly what you wanted to do from a young age?
No. As the third of four kids, I often played it safe. Somewhere along that, funny enough that you mentioned OCD, I am also diagnosed OCD. It's different than yours.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What are your traits?
Mine are like a perfectionism. It's compulsive thoughts and stuff, but it shows itself in orderliness. So it's not like checking things or germs like Howie Mandel. It's I will be consumed by, like, for example, recycling is one of my triggers. Like the obsession around the process. Like my homework when I was doing exposure therapy was to throw things away rather than recycle, address how it felt and whatever. But like checking things. So when my husband puts something away, I have to redo whatever anyone touches in my house. Like I have to go fix it. And I'm learning. One of the practiced homework is it's good enough. Like I need to leave it. So I'm trying to resist those, and I'm always doing the work, but it flared after my first child when I put my nursing baby on the ground because my chihuahua had peed, and I was worried about my chihuahua, and my husband came in, and it was the look in his eyes, which that look someone gives you when they're like, something's not right here. And that was when I deep dove into finding, I'd been in and out of therapy since I was young, 20s, knowing, that talk therapy helped me. But that was the first time I went to get OCD, like to have a doctor specializing in that diagnose.
So you were in behavior therapy?
Yeah, well, yeah, but yes, I was in behavioral therapy. I went to this one specific OCD specialist here in New York because my parents had joked about it and talked about it when I used to redo where I hung things, like I had to have an inch apart. I couldn't have a brown metal hanger and a white metal hanger next to each other. It all had to be white. I had to redo my shelves. My friends and my siblings used to move things, and then they thought it was fun. They'd say, let's see how fast it takes Sarah to notice things move.
They would move stuff, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, you guys, you don't know how ridiculously crazy that sounds, because it's funny to you. It is not funny to me. But that kind of thing would happen my whole life. But because the tools and the terms weren't there, I didn't address it until I was in my late 30s. And that's when a doctor said, no, you're right. That term is not being used lightly. You have obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's something we can work on. You'll always have it and it'll flare up, but you'll have tools to coexist.
I had a roommate first semester in college, and I went to the head of housing and got on my hands and knees and begged to get a single, which I eventually got. But nobody was allowed in my room.
I had a single too. I could not live with someone.
In a million years.
No.
And so everything was perfect.
Yep.
And the kids in the dorm would make fun of me because they knew that I had a trash can, but I didn't want anything in the trash can.
Yep.
So they would come in to talk about something that they really didn't care about. And then somebody would wad up a piece of paper, throw it in the trash can, and then they would wait around the corner and count how long it would take me to
empty that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I wouldn't reach into the trash can because that was dirty. I would pick up the trash can, take it down the hall, and dump it out. And when Alice and I first got married, we would do the laundry, and she would fold everything, and then I would refold.
I refold
everything.
it still to this day.
And towels. I can't stand the way she does
Oh
her
my
house.
gosh, when they cover the pattern up and
worst.
and
It's
I've had
so funny.
Yeah, so to come back to what I learned, some of those perfectionist tendencies, they blended with my idea of how not only probably controlling my life, which was more the OCD, but love and affection seemed to be, in my own mind, achievement oriented. So I was always the play it safe, work extra hard, do 10 times more than anyone in any room. Because you can't promise yourself you'll be the most talented one, but you can always be the hardest worker in a room. So I did that. And by the time I got to college, I was an athlete through college.
Play basketball?
Basketball and volleyball. And I was a government major. And even though I knew there was this performing, I'd always been in all the talent shows. I wanted to do improv sketch comedy. That's what I wanted to do.
Really?
Yes.
That's the hardest thing ever.
So hard, but I loved it. And so I kept thinking, that's not a safe job. Like, how will my dad's face look when I tell him that with all that I've done? So I waited, and when I graduated, I thought, I've done everything. I took my jersey off for the last time. I graduated from college. If there was ever a window of time to just try this, it'd be now. But I knew I went to become a page at NBC.
I was a page at CBS.
I know. Our stories are getting more similar.
I know.
So I went there and I thought, I'm just going to try this while I'm still really young. And then we'll see, because I'll always have a plan B, C, and D that are safer. And I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought, the second this fails, which probably will be soon because numbers support that I'm not going to just go make it, I'll have options. So I always played it safe, thinking I don't want to regret not having tried, but this is probably not going to work out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always credit OCD to my success because I was a pain in the ass. And I used to have producers say, I'll hire you if you just stop calling me. Because if somebody said to me, call me, I would call them and keep calling them.
Yep.
And some people are accepting of that, and a lot of people are not.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to know when to cut it off. But because I have been able to do what I've been able to do, I credit OCD, although OCD had... Now, you had intrusive thoughts?
Yep.
And so mine were, when I was a kid, if I didn't clean something right. Every Sunday, I talk about this in my show, all my friends were out playing, and I was cleaning my room over and over and over again. And my feeling was if I didn't do it right, my parents would get in a car crash and die the next day, and it would be my fault. So the cleaning made that feeling go away.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I started behavior therapy in, I was in my 40s before I got to the point where I thought, oh my God, I wanted to get rid of this, and there's actually a way to, to find that way. But I always say I'm 82% cured. I'm never going to be 100% cured. And when I get stressed out, it gets worse.
It flares.
And certainly having babies.
That was the fast
hardest,
forward.
right?
Yeah.
My son is now 42, but when he was 3 or 4 years old, he was the only kid who could eat an ice cream cone without getting a drop on him. And I thought that was normal. My wife told me I was out of my mind.
Yep.
And so when we had Meredith, the rules became, we're not going to do that with her.
Yep.
So when I used to put the spoon in Matthew's mouth and then wipe his face 17 times. And now I was told I can't do that.
Right.
That was really difficult for me. So how did you deal with that?
So it's interesting because in moments where I recognized, there was a day where the kids were playing with this like elf that shoots a Nerf ball, and one of the kids shot the Nerf ball. I was home alone doing the bedtime routine, and I knew that ball was somewhere and I couldn't find it. And I saw, because my bigger problem is less in an awareness of what the intrusive thought is, the bad thing, but knowing I cannot stop until I finish this. It just keeps going.
Yep.
So I knew I couldn't leave that ball there because it was never going to be found, but it was there. So I'm searching and I'm telling the kids, and I can hear my voice saying, you guys, we have to find this. And then the other part of my voice is saying, this isn't normal. It's bedtime. Like, let them go to bed. And I keep going. It was when I looked back and I saw Sandra reenacting it with Alec to try to trace the trajectory of the Nerf ball where it hurt and healed at the same time. Like, you could see how it was so innocent, but I was like, I'm doing it to them.
Yep.
And it was in those moments that I stopped and realized that I need them to do what makes me the most uncomfortable. They need to jump in the puddles. They need to make this dirty. This is it. It may not feel that way to me,
right,
but I can, if I know intellectually that's the way to go, I'm just going to lean on that. And we were just doing a hike the other day, and Sandra was in a dress and she fell. And my first reaction was like, that's why I tell you to watch where you walk. And she had mud all the way up and down her legs. And then now I'm better at pausing. And I thought, Sarah, what she should be doing? I was like, Sandra, you're a princess warrior. That's what you do. When you hike, you get dirty. And it was almost like I needed to tell myself that as much as I needed to tell her that.
It doesn't end.
Yeah.
Because with grandkids now, I'm going through it all over again.
Yeah, they won't be welcome in my home.
And you have dogs. You have a Chihuahua?
I had 2 Chihuahuas,
Oh, what
Trixie
happened?
and Peter. They eventually passed. They were old. I lost Peter right before I had Alec, and then Trixie right after I had Sandra. So
During COVID, my wife wanted a dog, and so she convinced me to do it. I did not want this dog. She brings him home, and of course, instantaneously, I'm getting attached.
Yeah.
And so I started this thing. His name is Charlie. And I said, Charlie, you want kisses? And so I would kiss him under his neck on the left side and then on the right side. So now, when I come home and I'll say, Charlie, do you want kisses? He hops on the couch, lays on his back, puts his head back. I kiss the right side, and then he changes. He does the left side. And I haven't seen him since January.
that's hard to be away
brutal.
from. Yeah.
Brutal. And I said to Alice, I hope he remembers me when I get home. I mean,
Oh, he will. That's the brilliance of pets.
Oh, my God.
Dogs specifically.
Especially those doggies. I love those
Oh,
doggies.
I love them.
So let's talk about your first job as a page at NBC, which was the creme de la creme.
Yes.
I tried to get a job in NBC in Los Angeles. You had to be a college graduate. I only went to junior college, and they told me I wasn't good enough to be an NBC page. So I went to CBS and started. Was it hard to get into the program?
Yes, it was. And this is the funny part when you say it's the creme de la creme and how you used to annoy people calling.
Yes.
Well, I followed a man on a train for days because I was commuting from, my brother let me live on his couch when I moved out here. He went to BU and I went to Smith. So we were a year apart. He moved to the city and said, come live on my couch while you're trying to find your way. What he didn't tell me is, yeah, people commute from New Jersey, but not necessarily like central New Jersey. I was literally on Bradley Beach by Asbury Park.
I know where Bradley Beach is.
Every day, a 2.5-hour commute
Yeah.
between cars, trains, paths, and then I wouldn't even take a subway in the city because I was tired of all the transport. I walked because I was like, I am transferring so many times to get to this job. 5 hours for an 8-hour day job. It was an entry-level production job. But I kept seeing this man with an NBC bag, and I thought, he definitely works there. And I could not get in. I was mailing I was following up, nothing. I stopped that man, and I right away pitched him. I was like, I hope you're not scared. I'm from Iowa. It's a commuter train, and there were hundreds of us. I still know this man, and he still laughs because he's like, Sarah, you can stop giving me so much credit. I was like, no, because without that ability, he said, I'm going to pass. Write me later. Doesn't know me from Adam. We're just talking. And I said, I've really tried to get in this program. I can't. He's like, email me later. I email him. I knew if I could get in the door for my interview, I could sell myself. But I needed to get in the door. Gary Quinn is the reason I got in that door. And then I proceeded to get in, but they were on a hiring freeze. So for the first time in the history of the NBC page program, they had fired pages and they wanted to hire them back. So that I got to the final level of the panel interview and I call in to schedule it, and this page said, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. If you come in right now for your panel, they're going to forget you because they're in the process of hiring everyone back. And I'm like, but if I put it off, what if I don't get it? And they're like, it's a risk you have to take. I called every week from November to April.
Of course you did.
When I finally one day pick up, and I expected, it was a quick phone call. It was Otto. Hey, yep, this is Sara Haines. I'm calling for the. She goes, well, that's funny. We just got the green light to hire back. Would you like to schedule your panel? And I literally was like, oh my God. So like, it was a coincidence. It wasn't creme de la creme.
But it was meant to be.
It was, yeah. And by the way, flash forward in 2020, I move out to the suburbs of New Jersey, not far out. I'm walking and I look up and I see Gary Quinn.
No.
Yep. He's with his wife. He's known me over the years because I used to always try to give him tickets when I had them to thank him. I've always kept in touch with him. I started crying because I was like, in my speeches, you're the guy on the train. Here I am with my husband, my 3 beautiful kids. We're in the suburbs. He lives 45 minutes away. He was up on a walking club. And he's like, Sarah, trust me, you're still the girl at the train in my speeches. God. And like, it was such a beautiful moment.
That's a great moment.
Yeah.
So your first job at NBC was?
Page program. And then I got hired into production coordinator at the Today Show.
What does that mean?
Well, so by the way, that's the first and last job I ever had. That's the one I held on to so I could try to do this thing. Production coordinator is like a on-site production manager. So production managers go out and conquer all the sites. Production coordinator is always home-based.
So you were in the studio?
In the studio. So I was a New York-based, I did all the logistics from catering to VIP tickets to cars every day to if a producer was going on a shoot and needed a laptop or an international phone, just logistics.
Right.
You're the person.
Did you love that job? Did you hate that job?
So I hated that job when I started because I thought I can't think of something further from what I want to do. And news, TV, I was like, this isn't what I was here for. But it bought me time in 30 Rock, and 30 Rock like was so transformative in what it exposed me to, the people, the learning. I'd never done an internship because if I wanted to go home to my family in the summers, I had to wait tables and babysit, and because I wanted to go home to see my parents.
Sure.
And we have a very tight family. So everyone came in with impressive creme de la creme accolades, all kinds of internships. I was learning on the job. So I thought this job is going to pay my rent and I'm going to learn everything I can.
What were we getting paid?
It was $14 an hour.
Yeah.
I think it was $50,000 a year.
Which in New York doesn't mean anything.
Which I could only survive on overtime.
Yep.
So the overtime was, and that's another reason I couldn't accept a higher position, because if you went up, one, I felt I was caving on my dream if I took both roads. But 2, you lost your overtime. And I wanted to say, like, I can't survive here without my overtime. So, side note. But so I took that time to learn everything. I learned how to produce. I learned how to write. I pitched. Because I thought, they're not going to teach me how to be on air and do comedy here, but I could learn a ton about what the heck do directors do. Like, I don't know anything. So I just sponged. And it was while I was there that I started to make a reel to go on air and do interviews because they needed content for the website, and they had the morning concerts. I'm already there at 5 a.m. Let me just be on camera rather than a producer off camera.
So that was your idea?
That was my idea.
Oh, very
well,
smart.
The interviews were being done. But
right.
What I said is to my friends that were predators, producer editors.
Right.
I said to my friend Dan, I was like, Dan, will you let me, I'll do all the research, I'll do all the work, I'll do every single thing, and I will literally be your PA for the day around my job if you just let me do that. He's like, no problem. So I'd do all those interviews practicing what I came to do.
Sure.
So then the EP said, the executive producer said, if you want to tease those because you've grown up here and, we could put you on with Al. And I was like, okay. And we did it and it went well. And he's like, yeah, just let me know. Because I was working with an intern, a PA, and me. So I'm an entry-level operations person.
But they weren't paying you extra for that.
Oh, no. I couldn't interfere with my job. I had to go in and do it around that time.
So you get there at 5 a.m.
I'd get there and my job wasn't demanding at that time. So I'd have my setup for the VIP passes, not sneak away, but go away, do the interview. The intern who knew by description, this is around your job too. This is not a show dictated internship. This is Sara Haines, who happens to work here, asking you, if you have a passion project around your job, then you can do this with me. The PA I was working with was clocking more hours on the editing machine than the producers were. She eventually became a producer. The intern eventually became a producer and on air. And then I eventually went on. But we produced these, and I went back to the executive producer. He said, yeah, let me know if you do another one. Every week we did another one because he said it. He said we could come back. We did it every week. It became a series. And that's when I started to produce it and say, let me go work somewhere. I never thought I'd stay there because this was what I wasn't being mindful of, was that the horizon was changing. Now you have a Kathy Lee Gifford on the Today Show. But I thought, I'm going to make the best reel, and it's going to have the bug on it, the Today Show bug, because I'm here and this is all real content. And that's when I went to. Who
were the hosts? So Al was there.
It was Meredith, Matt, Al, Natalie, Ann.
And all receptive to.
They loved it. I revered all of them because I was there during the Katie Couric days and then Meredith. They were all so good to me. And honestly, if they could have not been welcoming, they were so great to me when I was on that couch because they were like, even when they announced that I was named a correspondent, I cried. And Al goes, right when we get done, he's like, yeah, they're paying you to talk and that's your first out of the gates. And I was like, I was so emotional to look at these people that I revered watching on air and the humanity of them saying, you're one of us. We're so proud to announce this. You don't announce normal correspondence on the main Today Show. They did that because of me, and I was so moved.
So, being from the Midwest, I grew up on the Today Show.
I love the Today Show.
That's all we ever watched.
Yep.
And so, my first interview on the Today Show was 1986 with Bryant Gumbel.
Yep.
And I was scared out of my mind. And Nickelodeon sent me to, these consultants to teach me, what if Brian says this? What if Brian says that kind of situation? And it was the first time the Nickelodeon got national exposure, so the pressure was really on. And I will say I nailed that freaking interview. He was tough.
Yep.
He was really, really tough. And the weirdest thing to me was, like 2 years later, I'm walking around 30 Rock, and I run into Bryant, and he looks at me and goes, Marc Summers. And I said, wow, I can't believe you remember my name. And he said, you all right? And I said, yeah. And then he did the Bryant Gumbel, really? And I went, Bryant, we're walking down the street. What are you, really? What are we talking about here, Oh my God, that was been magical. So how did you then make the transition from NBC to the next performance job?
Okay, so at NBC, my job that I got was I was kind of a sidekick to Kathy Lee and Hoda on the 4th hour of the Today Show.
Right.
So I started doing series like really fun. It was like you could pitch anything, an ice cream tasting and call it a segment. Like it was because now all the people going with me were not one-man bands. They weren't paying crews. They were paying my fellow producer friends that edited because I'd never gotten hair and makeup. It was like, you're just going to go out and shoot. And we were like, done and done. We did like a cha-cha convention in Puerto Rico. Like you could almost pitch.
You really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
We could pitch anything. We called it Sarah in the City. And then when we got it good enough, we were like, could Sarah leave the city? Because we could go. We did street musicians in New Orleans. We really looked at it as any day now they're going to be on to us. So let's just pitch everything and say, no, we'll go shoot it overnight. We'll be back, and we did it. And it was so fun. I loved that job. But my contract had come up and I really wanted to host. I wanted to,
Got the bug.
Yeah, I loved, like I had said about improv. Interviewing is improv. It's not scripted. It's what are you thinking? Are you listening to someone, responding? It's also a little comedy because there's moments, callbacks.
But it's mostly listening.
The listening, yes. And I love talking to people, hearing what they have to say. And I thought I don't know if I can do this, because this is a craft where they don't put you in the chair and then they're like, I guess it didn't work out. Usually somehow someone has to believe in you and it has to be more than you.
Yep.
So I was saying I really want a chance at hosting. And for a few times they were putting me in at the 3rd hour of the Today Show. And then a lot of management moved. Contracts up and I come to them and say, I love my job. Is there any chance I can just flex that muscle a little bit? Repeatedly, someone who I admire and gave me a lot of shots actually on air just said, I don't see you doing that.
Really?
Yeah. And I agreed. I literally respect that person still to this day. I get it. She just didn't see it that way. Someone else was telling me on the morning, like your teleprompter experience. I go, I can work on that. They're like, we love you. We're going to keep you. But this is where we see you. And it was exactly what I needed to hear.
But what did they see you as?
Doing exactly what I was doing.
That you weren't allowed to go out of that.
No, and they were, you're so good in the field. And I was like, I'm glad you feel that way because I love being in the field. But I want a chance to try this too, just in case. And I'll do both, just whenever you need me, like Christmas Day. And they were very open and I appreciated that and honest with that's not what we see for you. But hearing that to me was a no. And I was leaving a job I loved, a place I was familiar with. But I thought, Sarah, will you be okay to accept that someone told you what you were and never try? And that regret weighed so heavily on me that I thought failure would be better than this. I've got to go try. And so it was those words that made me say, oh my God, this is so hard, but I have to go. And then I was in a job, talk about imposter syndrome. They put me in a corresponding job, news correspondent, not Kathy Lee and Hoda, like a news correspondent doing lifestyle pieces. And then pop news on the weekend. Loved pop news, loved my weekend crew. But during the week, they could call me for anything. And I was like, this isn't anything I know how to do. They were asking me to write news stories. I didn't write news stories, like, you know. And so I was like, what have I done? I told my husband for like a year. I cried. And I was like, if I quit at 6 months, does it look bad? And he goes, you got to make it at least 6 months. I get to 6 months. I was like, a year would be better, right? If I could just cut that
Always
year.
a year.
Always a year. So I get to that year and he remembers, he's like, we looked at every section of months as like when you were going to admit that this wasn't the right move for you. Because I also wasn't getting a chance. I didn't think I'd be thrown into hosting. But then as that time evolved, I got asked to sub for The View. I got asked to, and all of a sudden it was dangled like it was a possibility, which is what kept me staying. So
it's so hard because other people control our lives in this industry, and we have goals and thoughts and ideas. And part of the question is, when that wall is put in front of you, why do some people figure a way to go over, under, around, and through, and other people just say, yeah, I guess I'm not going to do this? And I would not be happy. I never accepted the word no.
No, me neither.
To me, no means not yet.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, I'm going to get where I'm going to go. So when you started filling in on The View, did you figure this is going to turn something really big? Or
No.
I'm just temporarily here? And
No, I planned on framing the first email I got because I had said in interviews for years, like I once got a meeting with an agent, not because I was ready for an agent, but a friend at work said, I know this is kind of the things you want to do. You should sit down with this agent. So I sit down and this guy's asking me questions like, what do you see yourself doing? And funny enough, like Nickelodeon, like I thought, like, they were like, are you an e-babe? Like someone that's going to sell Spain to me? I was like, oh, I can assure you I'm not an e-babe. What's my next option? You know, like, but like Nickelodeon, and they were like, what chairs could you fill? And I said, well, a show like The View. And this was like 15, 20 years ago. I said,
really?
Yeah. I said the show, because it would have been about circa 2004 I said, The View, an unscripted panel show with opinions. I could do like a talk show like a Kathy Lee and Hoda, or like a Kelly and I don't know who was with her at that time, Regis. Like, I want to be unscripted. I want to talk. I want to interview. That's what I want to do. No wasn't going to work because otherwise everything I was doing was a bit fruitless. Because if I wasn't going to go live near my parents and live a quality life of I'm going to choose to do the things I know matter in this world, and I was going to stay in New York City, I better be honest about what I'm actually moving towards. And when it's time to go, I got to leave. And so
when you left The View to go do the GMA.
Oh, wait, it's the framed picture first. Wait.
Yeah?
So I get an email and it says, my agent writes me and says, oh, The View would like to invite you to be a guest on the show. I cried. I called my brother, who's like the biggest View fan. And I'm like, you're never going to believe this. And in my head, I thought, I'm going to have this email forever. I'm going to frame it, and I will always know I achieved my goal because they asked me to come visit. I got done that day, nervous, sweating out of places I didn't know, and I was like, I'm done. The goal was achieved. I am done. Never in my lifetime knowing, and call it cynical, knowing how this business works, how with all the talent and grit, there's also some luck, there's timing. There wasn't a world where my brain could go to that place. So I never really thought until it had become really regular and I was in all the time. But when I was first coming, I was like, I am done here.
Really?
I didn't nail it, but I definitely didn't mess it up, and that's good enough for me.
Well, you didn't mess it up because how many years you been doing the show now?
So I started 2016 to 2018, and then I left for 2 years to do a show, and then came back 2020 to 20 now.
Well, you're so smart on the show because you do your research. And that's what I appreciate and admire. You're not shooting from the hip. You know what you're talking about. And I also know when you don't feel comfortable, you back off. And it can get heated on that panel from time to time.
Oh, yes, it can.
And I've been there with everybody.
Yeah.
From Rosie to, you name it. I've done the show with everybody. Let's talk a little bit about, I've got 17 things here I want to talk to you about. What was the biggest obstacle you had to overcome?
In my career.
In your career.
I would say never having really tried at points. So when I was in that production coordinator job and I was justifying staying in New York to learn the business and audition, I was auditioning for pieces and then I'd go months and I felt stuck and I wasn't doing anything. And I thought, I can go home to Iowa and tell my parents, I got headshots. I learned what that is. I took an acting class, but something was missing. And I wasn't really putting myself out there. And I think as the years added up.
Really?
Yeah. Because it took me a while to find hosting, and hosting was the magic fit. So what I was doing is I kept trying to do auditions for dramas, comedy. And I took a course at like a very commercial acting place because I kind of wanted a casting director to say, girl, move on, or like, this could work. I needed some real feedback. And I was trying to get my spring courses, and there was a hosting class. And I thought, well, that one will be...
There was a hosting class?
Yeah, television hosting. And I thought, this one should be easy. In my head, I thought, because I was so centered looking at the comedy and the auditions, that this hosting class came up. And I thought, I'll just tack it on for the spring special. That was the first class that I actually thrived in. It was the first one where people were watching me. Like every other class, I'd get nauseous. It was time to audition. I felt, and there was a difference between I want to run laps like Rocky and I think I'm going to throw up. and I had to distinguish the two. So the hosting class, people would want to partner up with me. How do you do it? You seem so effort. And I thought, me? For the first time, it wasn't just the hardest worker in the room. It was the one that was figuring it out and felt the most comfortable. I started auditioning for just hosting, and that was the first time I started getting callbacks and booking things. And the answer was, oh my gosh, sometimes you think you know what you want. The comedy could move into the hosting. The comedy could come with me. But I'd never thought of the public speaking because I used to do public speaking in high school. I thought, I never thought of combining those into their own place. And it was hosting. And that's when I started to really see the traction. So I would say for those earlier years, finding my way, it felt like I wasn't always really putting it out there. The years were accruing and you'd think, gosh, you've really worked hard. Well, have I? Because there were months where I felt burned out. I was working 12 and 13 hours. I was eating my feelings. I wasn't having a social life to justify working so hard, but I wasn't moving the needle. And I remember really sitting with myself, are you really trying, Sarah? Like, are you really putting yourself out there, or are you just checking boxes? Wow,
fascinating to hear this. I would have never thought that was going on in your brain because you seem so confident in what you're doing. When I went to college, I hosted everybody's senior project in television production. And it's where I got experience.
Yeah.
You know, because one day a kid would do a cooking show and somebody else would do some sort of, I don't know, arts and crafts show or whatever. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was putting myself in front of a camera. And the more you do it, people come to me all the time and say, how do I get to do what you do? And I go, just do it. Go out there, host things, MC things. And that's the only way you're going to make it happen. So hosting game shows is one of the most difficult things in our industry, okay? People think it's easy, and I get frustrated as an old guy when they just throw people up there, movie stars or, quote, influencers, God knows what that even means, and they think they can do it. The sad part is I started back in the Jack Berry, Goodson Todman, the guys who were around who knew how to do it. There's fewer and fewer people, in my opinion, who actually know how to pull that off. But you do a great job on The Chase. Tell me about, did you walk into that and feel comfortable instantaneously? Did you have somebody who was your mentor and said, you need to come over here and do it this way? What was that transition like? Well, because it's totally different than what you do on The View.
No, I grew up in nursery school watching Double Dare. Just kidding.
I bet you did. Hold on, I got something in my eye.
Call back. No, I grew up though watching real game shows. Like you, to me, I was a huge Double Dare fanatic. You know that.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to do a game show because I'd seen so many people doing it, and I love games because I think they're unifiers. So the opposite of what I do by day is we're gonna wade into divisive topics, and you're gonna have to find your voice and be strong even when you're uncomfortable.
Right.
But it's going to create a lot of feelings. When you're in a game, the innocence of us and them or who wins is so sweet and fun, and everyone's screaming, yelling. Like, I love games. Game nights are my family's thing when we're together. We're all gamers. A game show, it really started to kind of land in me when I saw Michael doing Pyramid, because I came to Pyramid twice.
And he did it really well.
Yes. And I'm not going to lie, as a contestant, I wasn't so bad myself. They told me to call whenever I wanted to practice. I called Ari, the guy, every night. And he was like, I think you're good now. Like, people are polite.
Yes.
It was too much, but I won. That's a side note. So the thought of running that and getting all that energy. Now, I didn't expect, my family teases me, a trivia show, because I am more a Double Dare girl, a cranium girl.
I know. We've done it several times.
Yep. So that's my jam. My family laughs. They're like, and then you got a trivia show.
Yep.
I fail at Trivia Pursuit like it's embarrassing. You ask me a question, you could ask me my name. And because you're asking me, I'm like, I don't know what the hell my name is. Like, I freeze. So that's the one kind of funny part of the game show I did book. They called me and my agent called and said there are some game shows. And it's like, I've always wanted to do a game show because I had auditioned for a kids one somewhere.
Did you?
Yes. And I love the thought of kids because it harkens watching people like you and the kid energy. Didn't get it. A lot of didn't get it. And then The Chase came along and I loved it because the speed was appealing to me. My whole life, my parents said, Sarah, you have to slow down. No one can understand you. And so when I got to audition and use that speed, it wasn't easy. It's still not easy. It actually creates such anxiety when I go do it, like to pull it off, because it's almost like you're proving to the world, no, I can. Like, I still feel that. I don't feel I own the stage. I don't feel I walk in. No.
Oh my God.
I'm working on it.
That's mind-boggling. You know, talking fast was the thing for me as well, because I had to be able to describe a physical challenge in 20 seconds or less, because they said the kids aren't going to be able to, hang around and all that kind of stuff. And so I had the same sort of situation, but it did work for me. What's the key to being a great game show host?
For me, it's preparation.
Really?
Because I have to read for I know games.
Well, you have a bunch of material.
Yeah, they differ. For me, I don't want to ever mess up a contestant or a chaser's chance by making a mistake. So I really go over and over the materials. And there's like 4 packets because 2 are going to be used, but I have to read 4 shows worth. And
just in case.
Just in case. And so to go through that and just practice the words and the pronunciations and all the things, it just is a lot of reading. And I also want to understand it a little more. So not just read it. If you're going to laugh or make a joke, you better understand what you're reading. So it's kind of like I want to consume. So when I get nervous and I'm out in LA shooting, all I do are read those packets and deep dive. And that, for me, I always channel nerves into preparedness. So I never relax. I probably should a little more while I'm out there, but I don't. I am single focused to say, okay, whew, I pulled it off again.
Barker said to me, make the contestants the stars.
Oh, and they're so easy to support.
Oh my God. And he said, it's not up to you to get the joke. If you get a funny line in on a Monday and a Thursday, that's fine.
Yep.
But he said, if you make them the stars, everybody will love you. And when you look back at the best hosts, go to Johnny Carson.
Yep.
Everybody around them were the stars.
That's a great way to put that into words.
Yeah.
Because when you see the reason you get attached as a viewer, it's usually because the story.
Yes.
So when you hear their stories, you're right. As you're watching, I remember people by their story, not even their name.
Of course.
Like the magician, the guy that was the magician. That's how you always think of it. So you're right. And Bob was right as well.
Bob was right.
Yeah.
He really was right. And he said, it's not up to you to get the laughs. He said, if you make everybody else around you look good, then you look good. And I've never forgotten that. And I think that's been sort of the reason I've been successful as well, as I was learning from those pioneers.
Wow.
Who were around for so long and doing their job. I mean, Monty Hall. Monty Hall was amazing. It's interesting now. Back in the day when I moved out to California in 1973 and I said I wanted to be a game show host, that was a job you could actually get. Can't get that anymore. You got to be famous to get on television these days.
Yep.
And it's too bad because there are people who aren't getting the opportunities that really should be getting them. But because they are not a movie star, they don't get it.
Well, you could say that across the boards for everything right now.
Everything. 100%. And that's a whole other conversation we'll have off air because I can talk about that forever. So I follow you on Facebook. And do you write these things or are these quotes from other people?
Well, so I usually give credit to where I find them. I consume and have a folder called my Feel Good folder, which are words that impacted me, words that I have to live by, words that made me pause. So I always tag the accounts. There have been a few times where it's my words that have been pulled from interviews and things that will just, quote. They're usually other people's words that I've gathered. And again, I do credit those people, but it's like in a @ on the top. But they're words that landed with me or made me stop and it helped me. So I like to say, hey, this helped me. It might help you.
Yeah, this one, FEAR, fear, has 2 meanings. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. The choice is yours. I love that.
Well, because that's very you.
Yeah, I guess. But, somebody somewhere has struggled with what you are struggling with. You're not alone. Man, that is so true.
Yeah.
And I found that, especially about the OCD thing, because people say to me, what's the best thing of your career? And I said, I wrote a book on obsessive compulsive disorder. And to this day, I wrote that book in 1999. People come up to me and say, I didn't know what I had.
Yeah.
until I saw you on Oprah or until I saw you on the Today Show. And it changed my life.
I have to go back and read that book because I didn't know you wrote one.
Oh, yeah. I'll get one for you. That's the most important thing I've ever done. That you can change somebody's life and improve what they're going through means more than giving somebody a trip to space camp or whatever the heck it is. And that kind of becomes my responsibility at this point at 72 years old. I got to get you to the one-man show. We're closing soon. But it's about not accepting the word no and paying it forward, and how you just have to. I had an executive at NBC who told me, and my real name is Mark Berkowitz, he said, you have a Jewish name and a Jewish nose. Until you change them both, I'm never going to hire you. And this was a Jewish guy. Okay, always. And here was my theory. He's going to be fired in 6 months anyway, so I'm just going to wait him out. And at the time, Ed McMahon and Gary Collins were two of my best friends. And I went to Ed and Gary and I said, this guy wants me to get a nose job. Should I get a nose job? And he goes, and Gary said, look at my nose. It's been broken, 13 times. And Ed McMahon had this big nose. And he goes, it's not going to make a difference in your career. You're going to find the right executive who's going to understand what it is you do. He said, if you want to go fix it, go ahead. He says, it's not going to make a bit of difference as to whether you get hired or not. And so I used to play the game of waiting these people out and knowing sooner or later that they were going to go away. And, it's right place, right time. There's a line in my act about I believe in being in the right place at the right time, but I also believe in being prepared to be at the right place in the right time. And if you're not and you get that opportunity, good luck.
Yeah, you missed it, and that would feel heavy.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
By the way, with that reference in mind, though, that's kind of what I mean by having not tried. There was a point where I was doing all this work, and I thought, if tomorrow they gave me the job I actually want, which is go interview, I've never sat and held a mic. I don't know how to, I don't know how to do the job. Am I trying if I'm not actually practicing the very job that when they turn and say it's your turn, do I know what I'm doing? And that's when I thought I haven't been focusing or risking the part I want. So that's kind of what I mean to expand on it. It's exactly what you're saying. Will you be ready when that time comes? And I wasn't.
What's the best part of your life right now?
My kids, honestly. I think, funny enough, for every piece of therapy I've ever gotten, for every bit of self-help or work on myself, my kids and watching them and remembering I was one of those kids at one time, and kind of having grace with yourself that you still remain one of those kids sometimes. I've learned so much in compassion for myself, my process, things that I felt guilty about over the years, like my OCD, which I always thought was just weird,
We all do.
Yeah.
We thought we were the only people in the world who had that, not knowing a bazillion people out there are suffering from the same disorder.
Yeah, and I think my kids are, I can take the calling of my life example and hope to continue to give to people, but the kids are the most central focused I've ever felt in purpose, and the most honored I've ever been.
How do you juggle your life? Because you have to be at the studio at what time?
I have to be there by 8:30. I get there around 8:15. I'm ridiculously punctual.
Oh, gee, I'm surprised.
Shocker.
And then you get out of there, what, 12:30?
Yeah, well, it depends on the day. If I have things to go to, appointments or meetings, whatever, I can go a little later. But it's usually the afternoon, and I always have to have a workout because it's my mental health. I have to get my heart rate up, and I no longer look at it with the luxuries and privilege of a young person just trying to look good. It has truly been part of my mental wellness plan for my health. The juggling, what it did is it really streamlined that person that wants to have her head down, working all the time, saying yes and being a part of things, to, is this worth being away from my kids? For the opportunity, for the family, for the trajectory, where does this fit in our family economy? And it's made me much more able to say, sorry, I can't.
Been married how long now?
10 years this year.
Okay, so when Alice and I got married, I said, after we had kids, we still have to put away a weekend a month or every other month where just the two of us go somewhere. And it would be to Santa Barbara or San Diego or, one of those kind of deals. And I think that's why we're married. Well, two reasons. We're married 50 years. We concentrated on the relationship.
Yep.
And I've only been home 15 of the 50. So
that helps.
It helps. It's like,
the heart hath grown fonder.
Oh, big time. So Do you guys take time off on your own?
Well, we definitely prioritize the marriage. I think that's one thing my parents did really well, is that either generationally or a wise, proactive step, they always said, you guys are here because of your dad and I. Like, if the heart of the tree is not healthy, then neither will the branches. 100%. So we always felt kind of lucky to be with them. They did not revolve around us. We were taught very early, you are a part of a greater thing here, and you are merely a part, And so we've always prioritized the marriage. I think we haven't been great about getting away because I have older parents, so does Max actually, and they're not nearby. So we don't have a lot of the traditional infrastructure. I realized I had much less guilt when we're going to see my parents soon. When my sister walks away with them to go fishing, I'm like, I've never felt this before when you're saying goodbye with family, taking them. That is so rare for us. So we need to do better. We understand that sometimes our time away is a dinner away, where we step out. We always do regular walks in the week where I get home and I'm like, can we sneak out? So it's not quite where we want it to be, which is a weekend of.
It's hard.
It's so hard. But I would argue right now, it's not because we've lost sight of that goal. We're still logistically trying to figure out how to do that. But we absolutely know the key is that it needs to be focused on us.
What's it like going back to Iowa now?
Well, my parents aren't in Iowa, but I still go back
where
to.
Are they?
They're in Florida.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But I go back to Iowa, funny enough, every year. And no family members are there. It's all my friends, childhood friends, that I still realize that as life goes faster and faster, if you don't prioritize them, I have to get back. So I go back there. Going to Florida, I kind of am grateful for the weather change, but home is wherever they are. They could be in Japan and it would feel like home.
And where are your husband's parents?
His dad is in southern Florida and his mom is like an hour away from us.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it can be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe me. 10 years from now, make sure you can say that you chose your life. You didn't settle for it.
Yeah. That was back to the fear.
Yeah.
When I felt also with marriage, finding my husband. I was in the city hiding in a job and I blinked my eyes and I was like, whoa, I thought I was going to have a family. It was the most important thing. What is happening? Life was happening. I wasn't doing anything.
And it flies by.
It flies by. And that's when I tell people all the time, single people, I went online and said, if it's something you want, it's not for everyone, not everyone has to want it. If you do want a partner in life, you better be doing something proactively and you can't just be waiting in the produce department at Whole Foods. It's not going to happen. Because that's how I saw every love story told. But it was waiting and fate, not doing, which doing has always been my key. I had to be a part of it. And that's when I went out and found my husband.
What's the one thing you'd like to do that you haven't accomplished yet?
Well, I'd love the opportunity. I know you even said at the beginning, everyone has a podcast, and I love a podcast. I wish I had opportunities to do longer form interviews because I've never in all my jobs had a chance to really sit down. And I think that kind of burning in me is a curiosity driven, let me find your story. Let me learn what you've done. And so when I've had chances to sit down and just talk, and podcasts offer you more time.
They do. We've had some interesting people. I had Anthony Ramos on, and I knew him because when I first started getting back into theater, he was 19. I was playing Vince Fontaine in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, doing Grease, and there was something magical about him. And I knew a little bit about him until we'd had this podcast, and we sat here for over 2 hours.
Oh.
And the fact that he opened up and told me the things that he did was amazing. We just had Richard Kind on. It was 3 hours.
Oh.
But this man is amazing.
Yeah.
And he's done everything.
Yep.
And it was just and at one point he turned around on me and he said to me, let me just stop you right now. Why do you deserve to have a one-man show in New York? He said to me. And, you know, and we got into a whole conversation about it. But I love that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Dialogue is fun. And you're right. If you have a longer period of time, you can really get in and get deep with some people, assuming they'll open up. But this has been fun. I know you have a tight schedule, and you got here at 1:03 and it's 2:04, and I promise I do an hour. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Mark.
There's just something magical about you, and I can't wait to see where you're going next. And you've got this great career, but keep that marriage fresh all the time, and look after those kids. They grow up so quick. The fact that I have a 40-year-old and a 42-year-old.
You have grandbabies.
I have 3. One I haven't seen.
It's all boys, right?
Yeah, all boys.
Yeah.
And one of them was born when I was here doing the show.
I know. You told me about
Yeah.
that because she was
so
going to
I can't wait to go home and see Denny. Life's about choices.
Yeah.
And you have to figure this out. And when the opportunities come, sometimes you just have to grab them. And also, I'm really fortunate that the lady I'm married to just always said, go do what you want to do.
I love that.
And that was, I'm super lucky.
Yeah.
Because I have many friends in the industry who aren't married anymore because they didn't understand what the industry was. And obviously your husband does, which is great. And so be thankful for that. But don't stop looking for those next opportunities because you just never know where it's going to take you. And you have such talent and such intelligence. And I can't wait to see what that, to go from hosting to the game show thing. What's next? Stay tuned. Sara Haines. I can't wait to watch that. Marc Summers, Unwrapping Sara Haines. We'll see you next week with more stuff. And thanks for listening. Take care. Marc Summers Unwraps is a production of Believe Limited, created by me, Marc Summers, and Jessica Richmond. Produced by Keith Korneluk and Jessica Richmond. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Geelan. Post-production support from Joshua Sterling Bragg and Believe Limited. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you really love it, why don't you leave us a rating and a review? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Marc Summers Unwraps.